All right, good evening, everybody. So who out here is a schedule person? Who likes schedules? All right, so I'm sure when you guys saw in there it said Bill is preaching tonight and not me and Bill, you're like, oh, they broke the schedule. Oh, but we had to do that for a reason, because we had Stephen leading singing, Bill preaching, and then if you saw that I was preaching too, y'all just might have left. So we had to sneak that in a little bit so you guys stayed. But thank you all for coming tonight. So recently with the youth group this quarter on Sunday mornings, we've been studying authentic Christianity. What does it look like to be an authentic Christian? What do you do? How do you act? What is the lifestyle of someone who is an authentic Christian? So naturally, that has been on Bill's mind and my mind, and that is going to carry over into tonight. So tonight we're going to be talking about the funk. If you read the bulletin a few weeks ago, you probably saw an article in there that I wrote about the fall funk and about how that affects our youth group and I think the church as well. And so we're going to talk about that a little bit deeper in context tonight, just about this funk that we can get in sometimes as Christians. So I am very much a definition person. I like to look at words, look at the definition, kind of what does it mean, how is the word used, and just the whole context of it. And so funk is not a word that we really use a lot. Sometimes we might use funk to describe the dancing that Carl does sometimes that we see. But the actual meaning of funk from the dictionary means to have a bad or a foul odor, a funky smell maybe, to be in a dejected mood or a state of depression, be in a funky mood. I think we've all been there before. And then part of the definition that I didn't realize was to flinch from responsibility because of fear. So it's an interesting way to say that you're in a funk because you're scared of something, you don't uphold your responsibilities. But I think all those we can apply to this authentic Christianity, this funk that we can get into sometimes. So I'm going to talk about a few points of what does it look like to be in a funk, what causes it, how does it manifest itself in our lives, and Bill is going to come in and talk about how can we get out of the funk, how can we overcome it, how can we beat it, and be people who live authentically, not in a funky lifestyle. So this idea of the funk, what does it look like? So I think we could say being in a funk might say it looks like getting into a rut. You're just kind of going along doing the same old thing, and nothing really ever changes. Who in here has been in a rut before? Really? Only some of you. That's amazing. That's wonderful. Okay. So I've been in ruts multiple times in my life. You'll go up and down. Sometimes you stay in a rut for a little bit. Sometimes you're in a rut for a long time. You're just not sure how you're going to get out. And I think sometimes we get in these ruts because we're selfish, and maybe we're looking to ourselves. What can I get out of things? What can I get? What can help me? And so we kind of get in these ruts because it becomes about us. And so this idea of what does it look like to be in a Christian funk, of getting in a rut, maybe you're selfish in your faith, being selfish in your Christianity. What can I get out of it? What can God give me? What can the church give me as a person? What can I get? I think that can oftentimes put us into a rut of just kind of going along in life. Another way what the funk looks like is losing focus. It's easy to lose focus a lot. Especially, I can think of going through college and you're studying and you're going along, you're studying for a test, and then you kind of lose focus. For me, when I was in college, it was Facebook. That was the big thing that pulled your focus away. You'd be studying for 20 minutes and then, you go spend an hour on Facebook, typing to your friends or posting pictures about how you're studying or whatever. And then you study again, and you get on Facebook, see, someone said you're doing a good job studying, awesome. And next thing you know, you've studied for 3 hours but haven't actually done anything. And we lose focus sometimes on things. In Christianity, that happens a lot, where our focus gets away from Jesus. It gets away from being on Him to being on the other things in this life. Maybe your focus gets turned towards work or school, or maybe your focus just isn't really on anything. It's just kind of here and there, and you're just kind of floating along. You don't really have a focus or a purpose that you're honed in on. Maybe another thing that causes the funk is misplacing your passion. I think each one of us has something we're passionate about in the church, in being a Christian, something that we love to do, that we look forward to, that gets us excited. Maybe it's teaching a class, or maybe it's visiting somebody, or maybe it's worship, or praying, or doing a service project, or going on a mission trip. I don't know, whatever your passion might be in the church. But then sometimes we just stop using those passions, or we don't really fully use them to the ability that we have. Maybe sometimes we overuse them. Sometimes in the church too, you might be passionate about it. Somebody sees that and they just start pouring more and more and more on you because you love it and you're good at it. And the next thing you know, your passion is burned out and it's gone because it lost its focus and its passion. Another one is we just let the world get in the way. I think that's probably the biggest thing for us as Christians, this funk, is it looks like when the world just gets in the way. Maybe it's we're not coming to church services, which isn't you guys because you're here tonight. Thank you. Maybe you're not involved in Christ-like activities. You're not doing things. Simple things like bringing flour for the food bank, for Luther Service Center. That's easy. That's a great, easy Christ-like activity, but it takes thought. You got to think about it when you're at Walmart. You got to think, I need to get the flour. I need to spend a little extra money to put this in my cart. And it weighs 5 pounds, but I got to get 10 bags, and that's a lot of pounds. And, just little things. Are we doing those Christ-like activities? And those are just different ways that we can say, these things are keeping the funk in my life. Now, what does this funk cause? We see what it looks like. Now, what does it cause? I'll use some of the words. One thing that pops in my mind is the funk causes a bad-smelling Christian. Now, I've smelled some bad Christians, and it was not to have to do with BO. It had to do with they were just a bad-smelling Christian. You didn't want to be around them. They were sour. They didn't really exude joy or happiness. They were just a bad-smelling person that when you were around them, you just weren't happy to be there. It was just not a good way. The funk can produce these bad-smelling Christians. The funk can also produce a Christian whose faith is in a state of depression. Christians that you're around them, they're always depressed. Life is always horrible. Life is always against them. Life is always falling apart. Nothing is good. The sun never shines. And then you don't ever want to be around those people because you go to them and you just get dragged down. You're like, I don't want to talk to that person. The sky's always falling. They're always worried about getting Ebola. It's just, you don't want to be around those people because they're always just so depressed. I think we have the funk can really cause that depression. And then maybe, too, the whole fleeing from responsibility. I think sometimes you get in the funk, and it keeps us from being responsible Christians, from doing what we need to do, from things like coming to church and being a part of the church, from worshiping, from serving. Maybe it keeps us from doing things like Bible reading or prayer. Just being a good example, fleeing from that responsibility of good Christianity. The funk can do that. So these things I think we kind of all understand now what it kind of looks like. We've all probably seen that. We've maybe experienced it. So what causes this funk? Maybe this will resonate with you. A lack of focus. We talked about that earlier. So where do you see your faith going? Where do you want your faith to go? Are you just kind of walking through believing in God and have no real focus? I believe in God, and maybe He'll carry me over here tomorrow. Maybe He'll carry me over there. But you're never really praying. You're never focused on something. Never focused on maybe working hard in a ministry and bringing some friends to church. Or maybe you want to start a mission project or a mission trip. Maybe you want to focus your faith and time on that. So where's your focus at? Where is your faith going? I think a lot of times we as Christians don't have that focus. You kind of come, we show up, we sit, we go to class, but we never say, this is what I want to do with my faith. This is what I want to get excited about. We do that with our careers. We do that with our college. We do that with our money. This is what I want to spend my money on. I want to buy this house or this car. I want to go to college and get this education so I can get this certain job. But, with our faith, we don't say, well, I want to dive deeper into the Bible so I can be more prepared to reach my neighbors, my friends, or I want to spend 6 months in prayer about this certain thing just to see what God does in my life in this area. Or I just want to go and jump into teaching a children's class because maybe God will open my eyes to a new talent I have, or I can meet some of the kids and their parents and get more involved. Oftentimes, you don't have that focus in Christianity. We just want to dive in and say, where can I go next? What can God do in my life next? Maybe you're just bored with church, bored with your faith. I'm a minister. I get a paycheck from this church every month. And there are days I show up, I'm just like, I am bored to be here. There are days where I'm just like, I could be at home doing this. I could be on my phone looking at something. I get bored sometimes. It's not a bad thing to get bored. We're human, but it's a bad thing to let that boredom take over your life, to let it control you, to let it be who you are, to be bored all the time. Maybe questions you've asked is, do I have to go there again? Is it already Sunday morning again? Didn't we just go? Or maybe you ask yourself, there's really nothing for me at the church right now. There's just nothing going on for me, I'm just kind of bored with it. There's just nothing there. I think the funk can really cause that in us as people. Maybe just not caring at all. Just, I don't really care today. I don't really care what happens. If I go to church, that's fine. If I stay home, that's fine. Just whatever happens today, I just don't care right now. I think the funk can really cause us to be a careless person. A big one I think we see a lot in the youth group and throughout the whole church is the things of this world. There are lots of things in this world that just take our attention away. Things like sports. You got softball, baseball, football, all in the fall, just Sundays, Wednesdays, practice, all the time, always something. You ask a teen, can you do something on this night? No, I have baseball. What about Thursday night? Well, I have football practice. What about Friday night? Well, I have band. And it's just, there's always something going on. Or schoolwork. Whether you're a teacher and you're preparing for school, or grading tests or papers, or you're a student, you're studying, you're doing homework. Just random activities in life. Maybe your kids are in gymnastics, or maybe they're in dance, or taekwondo, I don't know, whatever your kids are in, the different activities you do. Maybe you're a huge Thunder fan, and you're busy going to the Thunder games on Sunday nights, and Wednesday nights, and Tuesday nights, and Thursday nights, and Saturday nights, and so then you're tired to come to church on Sunday mornings. Maybe it's your money you're focused on. You're focused on working an extra 10 hours a week so you can get that extra paycheck, so you can get a little bit nicer car, or pay off your house sooner. Or maybe it's just your time. The time that we have is so precious, and so you decide, well, I'm just going to skip church once or twice. It'll be okay, but I need to get some extra stuff done. I need to mow the lawn, or I need to go grocery shopping, or I just need to rest. Just these things of the world, there's so much. I'm sure each one of us can identify with something in the world that wants to pull us away from being a Christian, that pulls us away from being here. So those are things that can cause this funk. So now some questions we need to ask ourselves to know if maybe am I in the funk? Am I experiencing a funk right now? So here's a question you can ask yourself. Am I more concerned with life outside of the church than with my life and my time inside the church? So if you guys want to turn with me to 1 Corinthians. We'll look at 1 Corinthians chapter 10. Verses 23 through 24, it says this, I have the right to do anything, you say, but not everything is beneficial. I have the right to do anything, but not everything is constructive. No one should seek their own good, but they should seek the good of others. So are we concerned with, what can I do for me? It's not sinful to like the Thunder. It's not sinful to go to a Thunder game. It's not sinful to play a sport or to be in band or to have homework. Those aren't sinful things. But they become sinful, they become bad when they take precedence over Jesus, when they take precedence over being with your church family, when they take precedence over doing what is right and what is good. Maybe this one is something I've had to ask myself is, are you in the rut of just being a Church of Christ member? instead of really being a fully true, authentic Christian. So let's look at Luke chapter 10, verses 25 through 37. Luke chapter 10, verses 25 through 37. On one occasion, an expert in the law stood up to Jesus. "Teacher," he asked, "what must I do to inherit eternal life?" "What is written in the law?" he replied. "How do you read it?" He answered, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength, and with all your mind, and love your neighbor as yourself." "You have answered correctly," Jesus replied. "Do this and you will live." But he wanted to justify himself, so he said, "Who is my neighbor?" So Jesus said, "A man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho. When he was attacked by robbers, they stripped him of his clothes, beat him, and went away, leaving him half dead. A priest happened to be going down the same road, and when he saw the man, he passed by on the other side. So too a Levite, when he came to the place and saw him, he passed by on the other side. But a Samaritan, as he traveled, came where the man was, and when he saw him, he took pity on him. He went to him, bandaged his wounds, pouring on oil and wine. Then he put the man on his own donkey, brought him to an inn, and took care of him. The next day he took out 2 denarii and gave them to the innkeeper. 'Look after him,' he said, 'and when I return, I will reimburse you for any extra expenses.' Which of these do you think was a neighbor to the man who fell in the hands of the robbers?" The expert in the law replied, "It was the one who had mercy on him." So here you have a man, he falls into troubled times, and you have a priest or a minister, someone who should help him, passes on by. A Levite. Levites that was the tribe of priests. That is where the priests came by, the people who talked to God. Those were the people you looked up to. He walked on by too and said, "I don't have time." And then a Samaritan, someone who had nothing in common with this Jew. The Jews didn't even like the Samaritans, but he stopped and he helped him out and took care of him. So we, as members, as Christians, are we just Church of Christ members? Do we just come here? Do we just sit and go to class and be a Church of Christ member? Do we get in that rut sometimes while people are dying, being hurt, and passing us by? And we just pass them by? Or do we really become a Christian? Do we go and we take care of them? Do we dive into their lives? We can be the Church of Christ member and be the Christian at the same time. Another one, too, is what our theme has been. Are you seeking first the kingdom of heaven? Seek first the kingdom of heaven, and all these things will be given to you. And when he's talking about that, he's talking about you don't have to worry about what's going to happen, because if you're seeking first God, if you're seeking first his truth, he's going to take care of you. You don't have to worry about those things. So are we seeking first the kingdom of heaven? And then maybe you're just in the ultimate funk because you're not a Christian. I mean, you haven't chosen to be baptized. You haven't chosen to live your life in Christ. There's no getting out of that funk without Jesus, without putting him on in baptism. So those are just 4 questions that we need to ask ourselves. Are you concerned with life outside the church more than you are with being a Christian inside the church? Are you in a rut of just coming to church and no longer being a Christian? Are you seeking first the kingdom of heaven? And then ultimately, am I even a Christian? So those are all things we need to look and ask ourselves about the funk. So now I'm going to turn over to Bill, and he's going to help us find ways to overcome this.
Oh, the funk. How many of you guys know what we're talking about? The funk, right here. Hands up. And the rest of you guys are liars. Okay, excellent. So, we have talked a lot about the funk already, and how to look for signs of an upcoming funk, or maybe some root causes of this funk. And the next question we must answer is, how have we slipped into that funk in the first place? And not only that, how do we get out of it now that we're in it? And that's a tricky question, because the thing about the funk is usually you have no idea how you got there in the first place. And so as a result, you have no idea how to get out of that funk going forward. And so it makes for a very tricky situation. And every time I think about going through a funk in my spiritual life, I kind of liken it to watching some of my heroes in the sporting world. And one guy that comes to mind is Michael Jordan. Now, most of you guys have heard that name. He's widely regarded as arguably the greatest basketball player of all time. That simple. He's an amazing basketball player. He was one of my heroes growing up. And I think way back to 1992, when arguably the greatest basketball player of all time, Michael Jordan, was going through a funk. And on this particular night, Jordan came out and he missed his first 11 shots that he put up. That's very un-Jordan-like. You don't see that, not even in the video games. He's really good even in the video games, and that's just, it's not his character. And so he was asked about this by the media after the game, and he said this. He said, one thing about a shooting funk is that it's better not to think about it. He said, I just try to be as natural as possible and I let it go by as smoothly as possible. And if you put too much emphasis on it, then you start to think about it a little bit more than you want to. He says, even though I'm not shooting well, I don't want to think about it, because once you do that, you start to lose some of the instinctive reactions that I built up until this point. And it's really not that different when you start to think about that. That's really not that much different going from the hard court to the spiritual world. You know, we've grown up, we've conditioned ourselves to prepare for the funk. We've conditioned ourselves to say there's going to be things that come our way. And we got to just not think about it. We got to just trust our instincts and know what our instincts say, believe it, understand it, and go forward. It's really not that much differently with our spiritual walk. When we start to panic and we worry about the funk and only focus on the funk that we're in, things go south in a hurry. And tonight I just wanted to arm ourselves with some very practical questions that we could ask ourselves that we may be able to, that might be able to help us break out of that funk once maybe we're starting to experience that. So the first one that I wrote down is, are we examining our routines? Now, is your routine, I know we had one person in the back that raised their hand and said that he's a schedule-minded person. I kind of am to a degree. My wife is very much so. I'm a little bit all over the place, but one thing that I am very much is a routine person. Like, I need to have, if you look at my phone, I wake up at the same time every morning, and I have like about 3 alarms. I have one for the days I'm off, I have one for church, and then I have one for the days that I'm on. And I wake up. I don't hit snooze. I know that we have some snooze people in here. I'm not that person. I wake up, don't I? I've done it ever since I was a little bitty baby person. That's who I am. And I think about, do you have a routine where your day is just so jam-packed that you don't know how you could add anything else to it? Is that what your day looks like? We all have those weird routines where we go through the same thing day in and day out, and I think we can do the same thing with church as well. And sometimes it gets us to that funk. So let's talk about some ways that we can make sure that the church doesn't become just a routine in our lives. It doesn't become just something we're doing and everything. It becomes more than that. Because God didn't intend for it to just be a routine and just throw it away. He wanted it to hit us right here. He wanted us to give everything that we have in worship to Him when we come here. We're not hitting the clock at, let's see, okay, we're almost to 6. When's Bill going to be done? No, that's not what He wants. He wants us to give everything that we have. Everything. When we sing, we need to sing with all of our hearts and all of our minds, our souls, our bodies. That's what He wants. And that's the last thing that I want, is for it to just become a routine. And I know that it's the last thing that God wants too, because the Bible's pretty clear in saying that. If you have your Bibles, go to Revelation chapter 3 and verse 16. Actually, we'll start in verse 15. And it says this, it says, I know your deeds, that you are neither cold nor hot. I wish you were either one or the other. So because you are lukewarm, neither hot nor cold, then I am about to spit you out of my mouth. He doesn't want it to be a routine, because when it's a routine, then it's lukewarm. It's nothing special. You ever had a hot Coke? It doesn't taste good. Yeah, and that's kind of what the worship service becomes if it becomes a routine, and it's not that. And I'm so blessed that this church I don't feel like it's that way. So how do we change our routine? Well, first thing that I'd recommend is to find a way to mix up your day. What is a better way that you can start to break a routine than to just completely mix it up? And what are some ways that you can change your own daily routine? I can think of some for myself because I'm a routine fanatic. And for me, I wake up at the same time every day, and usually I do pretty much the same routine every day. I go to work, I clock in, I do my work thing, I come home, play with the kids, hang out with the wife, go to sleep. It's awesome. But I just wonder for just a second, am I doing everything that I need to do? Is my routine complete? What if we did just a little thing different? What if we said, you know what? My alarm for Sunday service goes off at 7:20. It does too. It goes off at 7:20. And I said, well, you know what if I said, I'm going to have it go off at 6:50. And for that time, between 6:50 and 7:20, it's not a lot of time, but man, that makes for a great Bible study. Wouldn't that be awesome? Do you think that would help break a routine? I think it would. Just spending that time in prayer and meditation, you start to break some of that funk that starts to break up. Routines can sometimes lead to a feeling of funk, and that can lead to depression and indifference. And sometimes that even, it leads to no longer having that want or desire to be here or be anywhere, for that matter. So what I'm trying to say is, don't get in a routine that doesn't do, because that's not going to do anyone any good when you just get into a routine that's hurtful rather than helpful. The second question I put down, I said, are we experiencing a lack of interest? At some point down the road, if it hasn't happened already, if you haven't fell into the funk already, you will. And that's okay. I don't want you to be discouraged when that happens. Instead, I want you to do a few things for me. When I've been discouraged in my walk with God, it usually was a result of my involvement level. The more involved I was, the more interested I was. The less involved I was, the less interested I was. And that was a pattern. And I want to encourage you when that happens, that if you start to say, you know what, I'm becoming less and less involved, I'm not giving as much as I was, I want to encourage you to figure out a way to get involved. And we've talked about a lot of the different ways that we can get involved here at the church. We got some great things coming up. If you love missions, we got a great mission trip coming up. Of course, Whiz Kids is a wonderful deal. We always need help with services. And we've got so many ways, benevolence, everything. We got so many ways that you can become involved here at this church. But when those times come, another thing that I would request is to reach out to a friend and share your disinterest. Pray with them about it. The more discouraged you get, the more I want you to try and get involved. The more I want you to reach out to your friends. And it sounds kind of weird, because that's not exactly your first inkling when you get that funk. You don't necessarily want to reach out to anybody. You want to just go into a room and be alone and work through it. And usually that doesn't work out so well. So I'm kind of asking you to go against the grain here and go a different way with that. But I feel like in my personal life, it's the best way that I've found to get over the fall funk. And that's not going to be easy, to really invest your time in something when you might feel like you're about half checked out. But if you really try, I think that you're going to see that it makes a huge, huge difference. I read a story recently that kind of illustrates that point. And it's a little long story, so I'm not going to bore you too much. I'm just going to hit on the highlights. But the story goes a little bit like this. It says that there was a man that was about to divorce his wife. And because it says he was going to do this because he had found a mistress who he had fallen in love with. And he had drafted all the divorce papers, and the wife had agreed to sign them, but she had some conditions. And it says it was their son was going through the end-of-year exams, and he'd be done with those within just a few months. And so the wife requested that the husband live their life as normal as possible, as if there was just nothing wrong, for their son's sake. And the husband thought about it. He didn't care for this idea, but he said okay, because he wanted to just get this over with, move along with his life. We're not condoning this story, by the way. I don't want you to get any thoughts. This is just, this all leads somewhere. But he said that she had one other condition, and that kind of perplexed the man, this next condition. She asked the man to carry her to bed every night. And he was, eager to have the divorce over and done with, so he agreed to that as well. He didn't understand exactly where she was going with it, but he said, well, whatever. Yeah, let's do that, and if that's what will make this happen faster, we'll do that. And so it goes on, and it's a little bit longer of a story than what I wrote down here, but it says as the days went on, he started finding himself falling in love with his wife all over again. And it was simply because he was picking her up, and he was carrying her to bed each night. That was it. And he ended up calling off the divorce and having a renewed relationship with his wife. And the point that I was trying to make with that story is the man in the story, before things even started, he was half checked out. He was already about half out of this marriage. But he agreed to make an effort. In this case, he didn't necessarily do it willingly, but as a part of an agreement. But he did it. And as a result, his mentality changed, and without him even knowing it, he started finding himself becoming more and more in love with his wife, because the little things that he had forgotten about that he used to do, that he would pick up his wife and carry his wife from here to there. He forgot, what that is, what that meant to be close with his wife. And he started to gain that back. And I think about, when we are getting ready to go through those times of our funk, we might have about a half step in and a half step out. And we have a choice to make in that moment. Do we step completely out? Or do we make a conscious effort to do something about it? Even if it hurts, even if it doesn't seem right, even if it feels a little bit awkward or wrong, or just, it doesn't feel necessarily great for me to call and reach out to my friends and say, hey, I'm having a hard time, I'm struggling here. Nobody wants to admit, especially as a man, I don't want to admit that I'm struggling, that I'm hurting, that I'm having problems in my faith. But man, I tell you, when I do that, and I can reach out to my friends, and they can say, I'm right there with you. And I'm here for you, and I'm praying for you. Oh, man, you feel a little bit of strength. You feel a little bit stronger. And all of a sudden, you step off of that ledge, and you start to understand that maybe it's not what I thought was on the other side isn't there. And it's a blessing, and this church has been a blessing in that way. The other thing that I wrote down is, have you experienced disappointment? That often leads to a funk when you've experienced some kind of disappointment. Now, I can relate to disappointment because I've been an OSU fan for 32 years. And for a majority of those 32 years, we have not historically been a great team. And it seems like, every time that we're about on the brink of a victory, we seem to manage a way to lose the game. And I know that that's kind of a silly illustration, but, I think of it in terms of what is important to you. Is there something in your life that you always feel like you're just about to win, but you get let down at the last minute, and you get disappointed? And it can be something or someone that's let you down. Maybe you got stood up for a date. Maybe your friends were talking behind your back, or a loved one has let you down in some way. We all have some kind of way that we've been disappointed. And I'd love to tell you that there's not going to be any disappointments in life if you're a Christian, but that's not true. That's not how it is. There are going to be things in this world that you get disappointed by. There are going to be people that you get disappointed by. And maybe that hasn't happened. Maybe it already has. But one thing you can rely on is God. You can always rely on God. He's never going to disappoint you. And you may not always understand what exactly his thought process is or why things are going the way they are, but I can assure you of one thing: God will not disappoint you. If you cling to him, God will not disappoint you. Believe it or not, you can break the funk of someone else and not even know it. Whether it be through a kind word or a text just to see what's up, or simply by being here. I tell you what, I don't have a reason to be in a funk when I look out and see you guys. That's awesome to know you guys are here. I tell you what, everyone goes through funks, and we've been cleverly calling it the fall funk lesson. But the truth of the matter is, falling into a funk doesn't just happen in the fall, does it? It can happen anytime, any place, anywhere. And I can't tell you how many times that one of you might have pulled me out of that, and that really strengthens me, and pulling me out of that funk helps out a lot. So remember that. Remember that you have just a great influence, and God gave you that great influence. In Proverbs 27, verse 17, it says, "As iron sharpens iron, so one person sharpens another." And I found that to be true many times. When I reach out, I become stronger. I've had many talks with this guy up here, and I'm afraid that when he's saying that somebody was smelly, then he's talking about me. But we've had some awesome conversations, and same with some of my buddies and everything over here as well. Just being able to speak candidly and being strengthened from those going forward has helped out a lot. It doesn't really take a whole lot. It doesn't take much to get someone else or yourself through a funk, but here's what it does take. It takes effort. It takes a desire to want to make a change. And more than anything, it takes God, it takes prayer. Tonight, maybe you know exactly what we're talking about when we've been asking, are you going through a funk? Maybe you know exactly what I've been talking about. If you are feeling this way tonight, before I got in tonight, I went to the back pew and I counted how many steps it takes to get from there to here, and it's not that many. It's about 30 to 40, somewhere in there, depending on how far you stride. But if you are feeling that way tonight, we want to offer you that invitation. Take those 30 steps. Take those 30 strides. This is a great church family, and don't continue to wallow in that funk. Don't just, wallow and hold it all inside, man. That's not what God's design is. God's design is for us to be a church. Kind of go back to what Steve said this morning. Why are you here? Why are you here? And what is the church? Well, we're here because this is a place. This is our church. And by our church, I'm not talking about these 4 walls or however many walls there are in here, because there's more than 4. But I'm talking about the people. I'm talking about the people that are to your left and your right. That's the church. And anyways, I wanted to offer that invitation to you tonight. Your church family is ready to stand side by side with you as we battle the funk together. Or maybe you haven't come to know Jesus through all this, and the baptistry is ready, water is warm, and there's no better time to do that than right now as we stand and sing.